Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Carter was driving home after her promotion ceremony. Her medal gleamed on her chest, the sunlight reflecting off her brand-new insignia. But just minutes later, her face was slammed hard on under the hood of a patrol car, blood dripping onto her uniform. "You think this uniform makes you special? You're all the same," and the police officer growled, tightening the handcuffs. No one knew that, at that exact moment, Alexis had pressed her smartwatch to activate the Falcon Protocol, a top-secret emergency system she herself had developed. This video will reveal how the one press of a finger exposed an entire corrupt police department and changed federal law and protected hundreds of black service members from injustice. Are you ready? Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Carter, 15 years of service, 2 tours in Iraq, had just been promoted to security commander. She drove home, her heart brimming with pride. In the rearview mirror, red and blue lights flashed. A police car sirened closely behind. Alexis checked her speedometer. 62 miles per hour in a 65 zone. She wasn't speeding. She signaled, pulled over, and placed her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 o'clock, just as her father had taught her. 2 officers approached, hands resting on their guns. The taller one rapped hard on her window. Alexis rolled it down, her voice calm. "Good afternoon, officers. How can I help you?" Their faces showed no goodwill. The officer merely barked, "License and registration." Alexis stayed calm, but she didn't know this was only the beginning. Alexis opened her wallet for her license and military ID, then reached for the registration in the glove box. The officer took her military ID, frowning with disdain. "This isn't a driver's license." Alexis responded softly yet firmly. "Sir, I am Lieutenant Colonel Alexis Carter, United States Army. This is my military ID, and this vehicle is registered to the military." The officer glanced at his partner and scoffed. "Step out of the car." Alexis felt her heart quicken. She knew arguing would only make things worse. She unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out, standing tall in her dress uniform, her medals glinting in the late afternoon sun. But the officer's eyes held only contempt. In that moment, Alexis felt the air grow icy cold. She could never have imagined the nightmare was just about to begin. "Hands on the car!" the officer barked. Alexis trembled slightly. "Sir, I've provided all my documents. I said hands on the car!" He cut her off. Alexis placed both hands on the cold hood. The officer stepped closer, his hot tobacco-laced breath hitting her ear. "You think this uniform is going to save you? You're all the same." Alexis bit her lip to stay calm. "I'm not resisting. I just want to call my commander for verification." Suddenly her arms were twisted behind her back, her head slammed hard onto the hood. Warm blood trickled down her cheek. "Don't resist," he shouted, though she hadn't moved. In that moment, Alexis closed her eyes and pressed her finger against her watch, and she whispered silently to herself, "Begin." Through sharp pain, Alexis kept her breathing steady. The Falcon Protocol was activated. 3 minutes. A signal would reach the military command center. 7 minutes, the first response team would arrive. 12 minutes, her commanding officers would be notified. 17 minutes, all data recorded permanently, triggering interagency response. The officer still held her arms painfully tight, hissing, "Look at you! A black woman thinking that uniform makes you different?" Alexis closed her eyes, her father's words echoing, "You are strong. You are smart. Hold your dignity. No one can take it from you." She heard sirens approaching. Opening her eyes, she saw black SUVs pulling up, the first one, then a second, and everything was about to change forever. The black SUVs stopped in an arc behind the patrol car. Doors opened, men in black suits stepped out, earpieces in, eyes sharp and cold. The officer holding Alexis froze. "What the hell is this?" he spat. A middle-aged man in a gray suit with a military bearing approached. His voice was calm yet commanding. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, are you injured?" Alexis answered firmly. "Laceration on my temple, no fractures, fully conscious, sir." The man stared directly at the officer. "Release her, immediately." The officer stammered. She's being investigated for impersonating military personnel." The man's face remained unmoved. "I am Colonel Mitchell, United States Department of Defense, and you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." The air around them thickened. This was only the beginning of the storm. The officer tightened his grip on Alexis slightly, trying to appear tough. "I don't care who you are. She's still under arrest." Colonel Mitchell didn't look at him. Instead, he turned to the man beside him. "Activate full video and audio recording." The aide nodded, raising a small device, a red light blinking. Colonel Mitchell locked eyes with the officer, his voice deep and icy. "Your name?" "Reynolds," the officer replied, his voice starting to shake. "Officer Reynolds, from this moment, Every word you say is being recorded and transmitted directly to the Department of Defense, FBI, and Department of Justice. Reynolds swallowed hard, darting a glance at Alexis, then at the black SUVs and the agents encircling them. No one spoke. Only the sound of wind across the empty highway. In that silence, Alexis felt it. Justice had begun to turn its wheels. Colonel Mitchell signaled. Two suited men stepped forward, gently removing Alexis's handcuffs. One bowed slightly and spoke softly. "We apologize, Lieutenant Colonel. We will ensure you receive immediate medical attention." Alexis nodded slightly, her gaze firm, even as blood trickled down her temple. Reynolds stepped back, his voice losing composure. You can't do this. This is state police jurisdiction." Colonel Mitchell turned, his gaze freezing the air. "You assaulted an active-duty military officer. Jurisdiction is now federal." Reynolds opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. Alexis closed her eyes for a moment, hearing the radio in the agent's earpieces. "Falcon Protocol active. All data has been recorded and stored." She opened her eyes, staring straight ahead. Her fight for justice was only just beginning. A military medic approached, gently wiping the blood from Alexis's temple, checking her pupils and pulse. "Lieutenant Colonel, are you feeling dizzy?" Alexis shook her head. "I'm fine. Proceed with protocol." Colonel Mitchell nodded and gestured to his technical team. A handheld screen was open, playing footage from a satellite camera above, capturing the entire incident. Reynolds stared at the screen, his face draining of color as he saw himself slamming Alexis's head onto the hood. "No! No way!" Colonel Mitchell looked at him, his voice calm. "This is just one of 17 available angles. Along with audio recorded from Lieutenant Colonel Carter's smartwatch, your case file is complete." Reynolds stepped back, trembling. Alexis clenched her fist, feeling pain radiate from her wound, but within her rose an unbreakable certainty. This time, justice would not be forgotten. The other officer, Cooper, stood beside him, pale as a ghost. He whispered frantically to Reynolds, "Tom, we're screwed." Reynolds clenched his fist, sweat beading on his forehead. "Shut up, they can't do anything." But his voice trembled. Colonel Mitchell looked at them both, his eyes cold. "You will be arrested for assaulting a service member, abuse of power, and obstruction of federal justice." Reynolds swallowed hard, his lips quivering. Alexis turned to him, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "I've served this country for 15 years, stood before enemies with guns, but I've never felt threatened until I met men like you." Reynolds dropped his gaze. Cooper stepped back, tears welling in his eyes. In that silence, the sound of military helicopters thundered overhead, and that was only the first sign of the coming storm. The sound of helicopters grew louder, the rotor winds whipping Alexis's hair. A UH-60 Blackhawk descended, its spotlight beaming directly onto the scene. Colonel Mitchell raised his hand to shield his eyes, signaling his agents to hold their positions. The helicopter door opened, and a man in full colonel uniform rappelled down, landing lightly. He removed his helmet, his sharp eyes scanning Reynolds and Cooper before resting on Alexis. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter," his voice was deep and commanding. "I'm Colonel Harris, Security Commander of the Southeastern Military District. I apologize for that arriving late." Alexis gave a slight nod, her voice steady. "Sir, I'm fine." "The Falcon Protocol operate as intended." Harris turned to Reynolds, his voice ice cold. "As for you two, from this moment on, every word you say will determine whether you spend the rest of your life behind bars or in the free world." No one responded. The helicopter's winds roared around them, signaling that the moment of reckoning had arrived. Colonel Harris signaled. Two agents stepped forward, handcuffing Reynolds and Cooper, reading each of their rights clearly. Reynolds struggled, his voice breaking in the wind. "You can't do this. I was just doing my duty." Harris looked directly at him, his eyes void of any emotion. "Your duty is not to assault United States service members. You have betrayed your oath to protect citizens." Cooper hung his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. I'm sorry." Alexis looked at him, her eyes cold. "Sorry doesn't change the truth." A medic placed gauze on her wound, securing it with white medical tape. Harris turned back to Alexis. "We need to leave immediately. The official investigation will begin tonight." Alexis clenched her fist and nodded. The helicopter roared overhead. The night sky darkened, opening up to a new battle, one she vowed never to retreat from. The helicopter carried Alexis and Colonel Harris to the nearest military base. Inside the cabin, the engine roared but could not drown out the tense silence between them. Harris looked at Alexis, his voice low yet firm. "Lieutenant Colonel, do you realize how far this will spread?" Alexis kept her eyes fixed out of the window, watching the streetlights below blur into faint streaks. "Sir, I know, but if we stay silent, nothing will ever change." Harris nodded slowly, a hint of pride flashing across his face. "The Falcon Protocol is your creation. Now it will become a shield for thousands of other service members." Alexis turned to him, her voice resolute. "That was the goal from the beginning, sir." The helicopter jolted slightly as it changed course. Though pain still throbbed at her temple, the fire of determination in her heart burned fiercer than ever. The helicopter landed on the military airfield. The doors opened, letting in the freezing night air. Alexis stepped out, her hand holding the bandage on her temple, her gaze unwavering. A team of security officers and military lawyers waited for them. Colonel Harris gestured to a man in a gray suit. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Carter. Begin the Federal Witness Protection Protocol immediately." The man nodded, his voice sharp. "I'm James O'Connor, the federal agent in charge of this case. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, from now on, you will have a personal security team 24/7. Alexis nodded, unfazed. "What about Reynolds and Cooper?" O'Connor replied quickly. "They're in custody. The federal arrest warrants have been signed." Harris looked at Alexis, his voice grave. "The investigation will be intense. There will be people trying to silence you. Are you ready?" Alexis clenched her fist. "I was ready the moment he slammed my head onto that hood." In her eyes now only one thing remained, justice. Agent O'Connor led Alexis into a small briefing room in the secured area. The fluorescent lights highlighted the white bandage on her temple. On the table lay stacks of files and open laptops. "We've seized the patrol car cameras, body cams, and your smartwatch recordings," O'Connor said firmly. "Everything matches perfectly, but there's something more serious." He pushed a laptop toward Alexis. On the screen were hundreds of data files, each numbered and carefully annotated. "What is this?" Alexis asked, her voice hoarse but strong. O'Connor looked straight into her eyes. "A secret database. They recorded every stop, assault, and fabricated evidence as an insurance system. Over 500 cases involving people of color and service members in the past 3 years. Alexis felt her heart tighten. She clenched her fist until her knuckles whitened. This was no longer just about her. This was a fight for everyone. Alexis stared at the screen, each line of names, dates, and notes flashing before her eyes. Each line represented a person, a victim, a life destroyed. She swallowed hard, her voice low but fiery. "Do we have enough to indict the entire system?" O'Connor nodded slowly. "We do, but it will take time. They have powerful lawyers, deep connections, and..." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "They'll do anything to protect this secret." Alexis exhaled, her shoulders remaining firm. "I don't care who they are. If I have to stand against the entire system, I will." O'Connor looked at her with deep respect. "I need you as the primary witness, but understand from now on your life will never be the same." Alexis closed her eyes, taking a long breath. When she opened them again, there was no room for fear in her gaze. "I've been preparing for this day my entire life." O'Connor closed the laptop, his voice decisive. "Tomorrow we begin testimony before the Federal Investigation Committee. I want you to rest tonight, Lieutenant Colonel." Alexis shook her head, her eyes unwavering. "I want to prepare. Give me all the files." O'Connor studied her for a few seconds, then nodded. "All right, but someone wants to see you before you leave this room." He signaled. The door opened, and an older black woman in full uniform, chest adorned with medals, walked in. Alexis stood, saluting. "Brigadier General Williams." Williams stepped forward, placing her hand on Alexis's shoulder. "I'm proud of you. Many black women in uniform have stayed silent when humiliated. You didn't." Her voice was deep and warm, but her eyes burned with resolve. "Tomorrow I'll be sitting behind you in that hearing room, and anyone who tries to silence you will have to face me first." Alexis felt her throat tighten, but she did not cry. This was not the time for tears. This was the time to fight. Alexis sat alone in the break room, the yellow light illuminating her tired yet unyielding face. Before her lay thick files filled with data on the illegal stops, racial discrimination, assaults on service members and black civilians. Each page was a cut to the conscience. She read every line, taking notes in her journal, her eyes unblinking. In her mind, her father's voice echoed, "Never fear the truth. Only the weak fear it." A soft knock sounded. An agent entered quietly. "Lieutenant Colonel, you need to rest. The testimony starts at 7 a.m. tomorrow." Alexis closed the file, her eyes still fixed ahead. "I will rest, but make sure all this data is backed up in 3 locations. If anything happens to me, it must be released." The agent nodded, his eyes filled with respect. As the door closed, Alexis leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. In the darkness she saw her path clearly, and she vowed to walk it to the end, no matter the cost. The next morning, before dawn, Alexis was awake. She put on her uniform meticulously, smoothing every crease, pinning her medals to her left chest. In the mirror, her temple was still slightly swollen under the white bandage, but her gaze was sharp and unbreakable. Agent O'Connor waited in the hallway, his expression grave. "The car is ready. The press conference will be right after the hearing." Alexis followed him, her military boots striking firm rhythms on the stone floor. An armored vehicle brought her to the federal building. Outside, dozens of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights crowded around. Alexis did not stop. She walked straight through the crowd, her eyes fixed on the wide doors ahead. Every step declared one thing: she was not afraid. Today, the truth would be revealed, and the whole world would have to listen. The hearing room doors closed behind Alexis, cutting off the noise outside. The large room was lit with cold white lights, rows of seats filled with people. On the raised platform, the federal committee members sat solemnly, thick files before them. Brigadier General Williams was already there, her gaze gentle yet steadfast as she watched Alexis enter. O'Connor led Alexis to the witness seat. She sat down, her back straight, hands resting on the wooden table. The chairwoman, a silver-haired senator, bowed her head slightly. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, thank you for being here today." Alexis nodded softly. The senator's voice rang out, firm but not cold. "We've reviewed the evidence, but today we want to hear it from you. What happened on that dark road, and why did it ignite the largest investigation in this state's history?" Alexis took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for, and she would not let it pass. Alexis lifted her head, looking straight at the rows of senators before her. Her voice rang out clear and unwavering. "That night I was driving home after my promotion ceremony. I wasn't speeding. I broke no laws. But they still pulled me over. I presented my military ID and vehicle registration. I thought they would respect this uniform. I was wrong." She paused, taking a deep breath, her voice softening but remaining firm. "They ordered me out of the car, humiliated me, called me words that here I don't wish to repeat, and then..." He twisted my arm and slammed my head onto the hood, blood running down my uniform. That was the moment I realized. This uniform couldn't protect me, so I protected myself. I activated the Falcon Protocol. The hearing room was silent. Alexis looked directly into the female senator's eyes. And from that moment on, the truth could no longer be hidden. The female senator leaned forward, her voice low and grave. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, can you explain the Falcon Protocol in more detail?" Alexis nodded, her eyes never leaving the Senate bench. "Falcon is an emergency response system. I developed it with the Department of Defense after numerous cases where black service members were executed with no evidence to protect them. When activated, it sends a signal to military command, recording all audio and video while alerting interagency response teams." She paused, her voice turning to steel. "Within 3 minutes, security agents know the user's location and status. In 7 minutes, a response team arrives. In 12 minutes, high command is notified. And in 17 minutes, all data is permanently backed up, unerasable." She looked straight at the senator. "That night, Falcon saved me. And today it will save hundreds of others who have been buried in silence for years." The hearing room remained completely silent. A salt-and-pepper-haired male senator spoke, his voice solemn. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, do you realize that Falcon didn't just save you, but also opened the door to an unprecedented investigation?" Alexis met his gaze, her voice resolute. "Sir, that was the purpose from the start. The Falcon wasn't created to save just one person. It was created to end abuse of power, to bring justice back." He nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "According to the data recovered from Falcon that night, we heard the racial slurs, the abuse, and your cries of pain. I want to ask..." He paused briefly, his voice softening. "Were you afraid?" Alexis inhaled slightly, but her gaze did not waver. "Yes, sir, I was very afraid. But being afraid doesn't mean staying silent. I'd rather tremble with fear than bow my head in shame." No one spoke, but in that silence everyone understood. A new battle had just been ignited. The silver-haired female senator looked at Alexis, her voice slow yet powerful. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, do you know that in the secret database we retrieved, there were over 500 cases of unlawful stops and assaults?" Alexis nodded, her hand gripping the wooden table tightly. "I've seen it. Every name, every date is a tragedy. But I saw something else, too." The senator frowned. What was that? Alexis took a deep breath, her voice ringing out firm. I saw that most of them stayed silent because they were afraid. Afraid of retaliation. Afraid no one would believe them. Afraid it would only get worse. Falcon Protocol was created to end that fear. The senator leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on Alexis. And you, Lieutenant Colonel, you're no longer afraid, are you? Alexis looked straight at her, her eyes burning with determination. I'm still afraid, but justice is greater than my fear, and I swear I will never be silent again. The hearing room was thick with silence. A young senator wearing dark glasses spoke, his voice deep and calm. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, do you believe the officers who assaulted you will be held accountable? Alexis looked directly at him, her gaze unshakable. I don't believe. I know, because today everyone here has seen the truth, and the truth cannot be denied forever. He nodded, flipping through the files in front of him. We also discovered in the database an internal bonus system rewarding officers with the highest number of arrests and fines against people of color and service members. The room murmured. Alexis clenched her fists, her voice trembling slightly with rage. They turned humiliating us into a game, into points, into achievements. She lifted her head, her voice ringing clear. But as of today, their game is over, and they will pay for everything they have done. The silver-haired senator nodded, her voice ringing out decisively. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, you said Falcon wasn't just to save one person. Do you plan to expand it? Alexis looked straight at her, her gaze sharp as a blade. Ma'am, that is my next goal. Falcon must be implemented across the entire military, and also in fire departments, medical services, anyone in uniform serving this country. Another senator spoke, his voice hoarse but firm. But do you think there will be resistance, that some will try to block it because their power is threatened? Alexis gave a cold smile, but her eyes burned with resolve. I don't think, I know, but I didn't create Falcon to ask for their permission. I created it to protect those they trample on. The hearing room fell silent. In that moment, everyone understood. The woman before them wasn't just a witness. She was the spark for a coming revolution of justice. A graying male senator bowed his head, his voice deep and filled with emotion. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, I was once a Marine. I know what it feels like to believe your uniform will protect you, only to realize it isn't enough. Alexis looked at him, her gaze softening briefly. Sir, that's the most painful part. This uniform should have been a shield. But that night it only made me a clearer target. He nodded, sorrow flashing in his eyes. Do you regret activating Falcon? Lighting the storm? Alexis exhaled slowly, her voice ringing out, each word heavy as forged steel. No, sir. Without Falcon I would have been just another number on a list. Another bloodstain on a hood, then forgotten. But now I am a voice for hundreds, and I would rather become the storm than be a silent leaf falling unnoticed. No one in the hearing room dared to breathe deeply. Everyone knew her words had just changed everything. The silver-haired senator leaned back, her eyes never leaving Alexis. She spoke, her voice slow but firm. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, are you willing to become an official advisor to the Federal Investigation Committee on Law Enforcement Reform? The room stirred. Alexis clenched her fist, taking a deep breath. Ma'am, I'm not a politician, I'm a soldier. The senator nodded, her gaze resolute. That is exactly why we need you. Someone who dares to speak the truth. Someone who has lived this brutal reality. Alexis looked down at her smartwatch, the device she used to activate Falcon that fateful night. Then she lifted her head, her eyes glowing with fierce determination. If taking this role helps me protect those without a Falcon, helps their voices be heard, then yes, I am ready. The hearing room fell silent. In that moment, everyone knew. This wasn't just an acceptance. This was the beginning of a battle greater than anyone had ever imagined. Brigadier General Williams sat behind her, nodding slightly, pride shining in her eyes. The silver-haired senator looked at Alexis, her voice ringing out like an order. From today, Lieutenant Colonel Carter, you will join the Strategic Reform Task Force, working with the Department of Justice, the Pentagon, and federal law enforcement agencies. Alexis gripped the strap of her hat on the table, taking a deep breath. Ma'am, I accept. A young senator leaned toward his microphone, his voice clear. Do you have any message for those who are afraid, those who have been treated unjustly like you that night? Alexis lifted her head, her eyes shining, her voice ringing out without a tremor. Don't stay silent. Your voice is your strongest weapon. They want you afraid. They want you to bow. But If just one person stands up, they'll know their nightmare has just begun. The room fell quiet, and in that moment a new light of hope was lit amidst the darkness of injustice. The hearing adjourned for a break. Alexis stepped into the long hallway bathed in cold white light. O'Connor quickly approached, holding a thick file. "Lieutenant Colonel, you need to see this immediately." Alexis took it, flipping rapidly through the pages. Inside were internal emails, messages, and hidden reports revealing the secret bonus system targeting people of color and minority service members. Her eyes darkened. "How many people are involved?" O'Connor replied quickly, his voice tense. "At least 32 senior and mid-level officers plus 2 precinct chiefs. This list will shake the entire police department." Alexis closed the file, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Are we going public?" O'Connor nodded. "This afternoon, during the next hearing." Alexis took a deep breath, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. This was no longer just her story. This was the day the truth buried for years would finally be brought into the light, and no one could stop it. That afternoon the hearing resumed. The room fell silent as O'Connor placed a thick file onto the evidence table. The silver-haired female senator looked at him, her voice ringing with authority. "Agent O'Connor, what do you have to present?" O'Connor nodded, pushing the file toward her. "This is internal data retrieved from the police department's security system. It contains emails, messages, and verbal orders proving the existence of a covert point system that incentivized officers to pull over and arrest people of color, especially service members." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Alexis sat still, her eyes fixed on the podium, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. The senator flipped through several pages, her face darkening. "These documents are enough for criminal prosecution and an expanded federal investigation." She looked up, her gaze cold as ice. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, your Falcon Protocol didn't just save your life, Dave. It has saved justice itself from dying under the hands of abusers of power." Alexis took a deep breath, her heart pounding. This was why she had never backed down. And she knew the real battle was only just beginning. An elderly senator tapped his pen lightly on the table, his gravelly voice shaking with anger. "These officers, they turned power into a points game, while their victims were those who swore to protect this country." He looked at Alexis, sorrow in his eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, are you willing to continue testifying as this case expands to the federal level?" Alexis raised her head, her voice ringing out firm and fearless. "Sir, I have stood before enemies with guns on the battlefield. I will never back down from enemies in uniform on American soil." The room fell silent. A young female senator wiped away tears, her voice trembling. "How many other service members have gone through what you did, but didn't have Falcon to save them?" Alexis closed her eyes. A single painful breath caught in her chest. "Too many, ma'am, but I swear they will not be forgotten." She opened her eyes, her gaze steel strong. "Falcon will become a shield for all. I won't stop to say it until that is a reality." The silver-haired senator clenched her hands on the table, her voice resolute. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, we will bring the Falcon Protocol to Congress to discuss nationwide implementation, but we need you as security coordinator and policy advisor for this bill." The room buzzed with whispers. Alexis took a deep breath, feeling her heart race in her chest. She looked straight into the senator's eyes, her voice unwavering. "I am ready, as long as it protects the most vulnerable." The senator nodded, her gaze softening. "You are not just protecting them, Lieutenant Colonel. You are changing the game." Alexis pressed her lips together, her hand gripping her smartwatch. The symbol of Falcon. In that moment her father's image appeared in her mind, his voice echoing. "You are strong. You were born to make a difference." She lifted her head, her eyes blazing with determination. "I wasn't born to be silent. I was born to make those who abuse power fear the truth." The hearing room fell silent, and there a quiet revolution had begun. After the hearing ended, Alexis walked out into the long hallway bathed in warm yellow light. Brigadier General Williams was waiting, pride shining in her eyes. "You did well, Alexis." Alexis exhaled, her voice hoarse after hours of testimony. "Thank you, General, but this is only the beginning." Williams nodded, her voice slow but powerful. "I will issue an order to deploy the Falcon Protocol across the entire district immediately. What you did today will save lives." Alexis looked straight into her eyes, her gaze an ocean of determination. "I didn't do this for myself. I did it for those who will never get the chance to sit here and tell their story. Williams placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. You've changed the system, Alexis. Don't forget, you're no longer fighting alone. Alexis nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. I know, General, and I swear, I will see this through to the end. The sound of her military boots echoed through the hallway as she walked on, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in her battle for justice. Leaving the federal building, Alexis was escorted by 2 security agents. When they reached the parking lot, she paused, looking up at the twilight sky, the setting sun casting its glow on her uniform and the white bandage on her temple. Agent O'Connor approached, his voice deep and urgent. Lieutenant Colonel, urgent news. Reynolds, the officer who assaulted you, has requested to meet in person. Alexis frowned, her eyes darkening. What does he want? O'Connor shook his head. We're not sure, but he says he has information that will bring down the entire system if you listen. Alexis gazed into the distance, a cold glint in her eyes. Arrange the meeting, but maximum security. O'Connor nodded, immediately pulling out his phone to make the call. The evening wind blew hard, whipping her uniform. In her heart, a sharp intuition rose. This meeting could change the entire course of the battle. The next morning at the Federal Detention Center, Alexis entered the interrogation room. 2 security agents accompanied her, checking all recording and security equipment. Reynolds sat across the table, his hands cuffed, his face far more gaunt than the night he attacked her. He looked up at Alexis, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, thank you for coming. Alexis didn't sit. She stood tall, her gaze ice cold. What do you want? Reynolds swallowed hard, his hands trembling as they clenched together. I know, nothing can forgive what I did, but if you want to bring down this whole system, I have what you need. Alexis narrowed her eyes, her voice steely. Speak. Reynolds lowered his head, tears falling onto the cold metal table. There is another underground database, not stored on police systems. It records everything. Evidence tampering, racial profiling, bribe splits, covered-up deaths. I know how to access it. Alexis clenched her fist, her heart pounding. In that moment, she understood. This battle was about to reach a whole new level. Alexis remained standing, her eyes boring into Reynolds as if to pierce his mind. Why are you giving this to me? Reynolds took a deep breath, his voice shaking. Because I can't take it to the grave. I know I'll be in prison for life, but at least I want the truth to come out. Alexis lowered her voice, each word cutting like a cold blade. Or are you just trying to reduce your sentence? Reynolds looked up, eyes red and wet. At first, yes, but when I saw my kids crying from shame, I knew I had to do the right thing. The interrogation room fell into heavy silence. Finally, Alexis nodded slowly. Good, give me the access. With trembling hands, Reynolds pulled a small note from his prison pocket, sliding it across the table. This is the password and server name. But you need to hurry. If they find out I leaked this, they'll wipe everything. Alexis took the note, gripping it tightly. In her eyes now was no longer the gaze of a victim. It was the gaze of a warrior, ready to bring down an entire corrupt empire to reclaim justice for those who have lost their voice. Leaving the detention block, Alexis walked swiftly down the cold gray federal corridor. O'Connor caught up, worry in his eyes. Is he telling the truth? Alexis clenched the note in her hand, her voice cold and firm. We'll find out soon. Inside the armored vehicle, O'Connor opened his encrypted laptop, typing rapidly with the information Reynolds provided. The black screen flickered and hundreds of folders appeared, each named after a district or police department containing video files, audio, and internal emails. O'Connor muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the screen. God, this is a treasure trove of crimes. Alexis stared at the data, her heart tightening as she read file titles. Body cam deleted footage, fake charges list, settlements NDAs. She leaned closer, her voice ringing out steely. Download everything to the military server and send an encrypted copy to the Department of Justice immediately. O'Connor nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he typed the commands. In Alexis' eyes now burned only one thing, the determination to burn down the darkness that had swallowed justice for far too long. The armored vehicle sped down the avenue, city lights streaking across the windows. Inside, O'Connor continued working, data pouring rapidly into secure drives. Alexis looked out, her face tense with hundreds of racing thoughts. O'Connor finally looked up, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Colonel, we have over 800 gigabytes of data. Videos, audio files, emails, messages, evidence of hundreds of severe violations. This could become the largest civil rights case in the state's history. Alexis turned to him, her eyes darkening, her voice ringing out like a command. Not just this state. This is the beginning for the entire country. The vehicle turned sharply into the military base, guards running to open the gates. As it stopped, Alexis clenched the password note in her hands until it wrinkled. She whispered to herself, just loud enough to hear, "Dad, today I saw what I swore to destroy. I promise. I will see this through, no matter what it costs." She took a deep breath and stepped out. The night sky was dark and thick, but in Alexis's eyes, a new dawn was beginning to rise. Alexis and O'Connor walked briskly into the base's cybersecurity command room. On the giant wall screen, the downloaded data appeared as thousands of small files clustered like honeycomb. Colonel Harris was already there, his eyes darkening as he scanned the file titles. "Has Falcon Protocol backed everything up?" he asked, his voice deep as thunder. O'Connor nodded. "Triple backups complete. Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and NATO secure servers. No one can erase it now." Alexis stepped forward, pointing to a folder named Settlements NDA's Military. Her voice was ice cold. "Open it." The screen displayed a long list of service member names, compensation amounts, notes reading silenced, settled internally. Alexis clenched her teeth, her hand curling into a fist. They bought our silence. As if dignity had a price. Harris placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice decisive. "No more. With what you've uncovered today, this entire system will fall." Alexis lifted her head, her gaze sharp as a blade drawn from its sheath. "And I will be the one to ignite it." Colonel Harris turned to O'Connor, his voice firm. "Prepare an emergency meeting with the Department of Justice and the Pentagon in 30 minutes. I want all this data analyzed immediately." O'Connor nodded and rushed out. Harris looked at Alexis, his eyes softening slightly. "Do you know what you've just done, Lieutenant Colonel?" Alexis stood tall, unblinking. "I know, sir. I just started a war the enemy isn't prepared to fight." Harris nodded slightly, his voice deepening. "And you will become their biggest target." Alexis let out a short, cold laugh, but there was no fear in it. "I've been a target my whole life because of my skin color, sir. But this time, I'm a target they can't take down." Harris squeezed her shoulder gently. "Then get ready, Carter, because from this moment on, there's no turning back." Alexis lifted her head, her eyes gleaming with the cold light of forged steel. "I don't need a way back, Colonel. I just need a path straight to the truth." 30 minutes later, in the high-security briefing room, white lights illuminated the solemn faces gathered. On the large screen, data continued to decrypt, each video, email, and audio file surfacing as irrefutable evidence. A Department of Justice official stood up, his voice gravelly. "God, this is an entire criminal network. If released, it will shatter the public image of law enforcement nationwide." Alexis raised her head, her voice ringing out cold and sharp. "Sir, that image isn't shattered by the truth. It was shattered by their actions. The truth simply illuminates it." The room fell silent. Colonel Harris nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I agree with Lieutenant Colonel Carter. We can't keep our eyes closed and hope this rot will disappear on its own." Alexis looked directly at everyone in the room, her gaze blazing with resolve. "Today we have a chance to do the right thing. If we don't, we're no different from them." In that moment, every eye turned to Alexis. And everyone knew she was no longer just a witness. She had become the standard bearer of this fight. A female Pentagon official leaned towards the microphone, her voice sharp as ice. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, are you willing to appear before the nation to present this evidence?" Alexis didn't blink, her voice unwavering. "I'm ready, but this isn't about me. This is about the thousands of victims who have been silenced for years." The official nodded, respect filling her eyes. "Good, because when you speak out, it will cause a political and social earthquake. And there will be people who will try to destroy you before you reach that podium." Alexis gave a cold smile, icy and calm. "They tried to kill me once. I'm still here." Colonel Harris looked at her, his voice deep and steady. "Carter, remember, when you expose the truth, you're not just fighting corrupt officers. You are fighting an entire system that has existed for decades." Alexis turned to him, her eyes burning with an unquenchable resolve. "I know, sir, and that's exactly why I won't stop until it collapses." The meeting ended. Alexis walked quickly down the hallway, O'Connor hurrying behind her. Lieutenant Colonel, we're arranging 24/7 security until your announcement. They will try anything to stop you. Alexis didn't slow down, her voice ringing out cold. Let them try. She paused in front of a large window overlooking the base courtyard, where soldiers trained under a blazing red sunset. Her eyes sparkled, not with emotion, but with a raging determination. O'Connor sighed, his voice softening. Are you afraid? Alexis turned to him, her gaze sharp as a drawn blade. Of course, but I'm more afraid that one day I'll look in the mirror and see someone who stayed silent when she could have changed this entire system. The evening wind swept through the hallway, whipping her uniform coat. In that moment, Alexis Carter was no longer just a lieutenant colonel. She had become a symbol of truth, of justice, and of a future free from the darkness that silenced the powerless. That night, in her private quarters on base, Alexis sat alone at her desk. The yellow lamplight illuminated her bruised face and the white bandage on her temple. In front of her lay the newly downloaded data copies. She turned each page, reading every email, each short chat laced with poisonous racism. Her heart twisted seeing the names of service members pulled over, beaten, framed, then silenced with settlement agreements. Beside the files was an old photo, her at 12 in junior cadet uniform standing next to her late father, a black veteran. Alexis ran her finger over his face, whispering, Dad, I'm about to do something that could change everything. I'm so scared, but I know if you were here you'd say, the truth is always worth the price, my girl. She set the photo down, lifting her head. Her eyes were no longer wet. In them remained only one thing, a vow never to back down, even if tomorrow the whole world turned against her. The next morning, the base bustled busier than usual. Helicopters landed continuously, bringing Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and federal media officials. Alexis stood before the mirror, adjusting her uniform, smoothing every crease. The white bandage on her temple remained, but she didn't cover it. It was a mark of truth, of why she stood there today. O'Connor knocked softly and entered, his face grave. Lieutenant Colonel, it's time. Alexis nodded. They walked down the hallway lined with armed security agents standing at attention, their gazes steady. As they passed, each agent straightened further. On the way to the helipad, O'Connor spoke quietly. Millions will be watching you today. Do you have any last words before stepping onto this stage? Alexis stopped, taking a deep breath. The morning wind blew, lifting her uniform coat. She turned to him, her voice ringing out hard as steel. No one has the right to trample our dignity and force our silence. Today I don't just speak for myself, I speak for all of them. Then she stepped onto the helicopter, ready for the greatest battle of her life. The helicopter landed atop the federal building, where the national press conference was being prepared. When the door opened, strong winds blew Alexis's hair back. She stepped down, her gaze unwavering. Security agents led her down a glass corridor, the city sprawling below in morning light. O'Connor walked beside her, speaking into his radio. Rooftop security, report. Clear, ready for arrival. At the press conference doors, Colonel Harris awaited, pride shining in his eyes. Carter, today you're not just speaking the truth, you're rewriting history. Alexis gripped her hat strap, nodding. Sir, I don't care if history remembers my name. I just need to make sure. Those who destroyed thousands of lives and never do it again. Dimben, Harris smiled slightly, patting her shoulder. Go, Lieutenant Colonel, the world is waiting to hear you. Alexis inhaled deeply and pushed open the doors. Camera flashes erupted instantly. Hundreds of lenses pointed at her. The small woman with a white bandage on her temple, standing tall like an unbreakable warrior. Alexis stepped onto the podium, lights shining directly onto her calm yet resolute face. Below, hundreds of international journalists crowded, microphones raised. Behind her, the large screen read, Falcon Protocol and Systemic Crimes Disclosure. She placed both hands on the podium, scanning the room before speaking. Her voice rang out strong, clear without a microphone. Today I stand here, not as a soldier, but as a human being. A human who witnessed what no one should, being assaulted, humiliated, treated like garbage, just because of skin color. She paused, her eyes flashing cold. But I also stand here with the truth they tried to bury. I have evidence showing hundreds of black service members and civilians were targeted, deceived, and silenced with money or threats. Shocked murmurs rose from the audience. Alexis clenched her fists on the podium, her voice ringing like a declaration of war. And starting today, their game is over. The room was thick with tension. Journalists raised their hands, microphones pointed at Alexis. A CNN reporter stood, her voice trembling with emotion. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, can you share... How did you gather all this evidence?" Alexis looked directly at her gaze sharp, but her voice remained calm. "In a way they never expected. Through their arrogance, they thought no one would ever challenge them, so they stored everything as their shield. But today that shield has become their chains." A BBC reporter spoke quickly, his voice urgent. "Are you afraid of retaliation? They have power, money, and guns." Alexis stayed silent for a few seconds, then gave a faint, cold smile. "I've had guns pointed at my head on the battlefield. I've had my head slammed onto a hood in my own country. If justice requires me to face them again, then let them come." Camera flashes exploded. In that moment, everyone saw. This was no ordinary press conference. This was the declaration of war by a woman with nothing left to lose, except her silence. An AP reporter stood, his voice clear across the room. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, what are your next steps after today? Who will you give these files to?" Alexis looked directly at him, her eyes blazing with unstoppable determination. "I will give them to the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and the Federal Investigation Committee. But make no mistake..." She leaned toward the microphone, her voice dropping to cold steel. "I'm not handing them over to be locked away in a safe. I'm giving them to force action. And I swear, if they don't act, I will release every file, every email, every video to the public until no one can hide in the shadows anymore." Cameras clicked rapidly. Another reporter asked quickly, "Aren't you afraid of prosecution for releasing classified documents?" Alexis pressed her lips together, giving a cold smile. "If protecting truth and justice is a crime, then I'm ready to stand trial." In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Before them stood not just a soldier, but the embodiment of absolute courage. Outside the federal building, crowds had gathered, holding banners reading "A Justice for All" and "We Stand with Carter." On the giant LED screen set up in the square, Alexis's speech was broadcast live. An elderly veteran with a silver beard let tears roll down his sunburned cheeks. He whispered, voice trembling, "Finally, someone dares to speak the truth for us." Beside him, a young female soldier clenched her fist, her eyes shining with hope. "She did it, which means we can too." In the press room, Alexis paused, looking straight into the live stream camera broadcasting nationwide. Her voice rang out, low but powerful as thunder. "I know out there are millions who have been abused by power, silenced, and so afraid they believed they were invisible. Hear me say this." She gripped the podium tightly, unblinking. "You are not invisible. I see you, and today the entire nation sees you too." Camera flashes blazed. In that moment, Alexis Carter became the voice for all those forgotten for far too long in the shadows. An NBC reporter stood, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, are you worried your life will never return to normal after today?" Alexis looked directly at him, her gaze calm but unyielding. "No, I'm not worried. Because ever since the day my head was slammed onto that hood, normal no longer exists." She paused, her voice softening but heavy with meaning. "I'm not fighting to go back to a normal life for myself. I'm fighting to build a safer future for those who come after me." A USA Today reporter asked quickly, her voice breaking with emotion, "Where do you find this courage, Lieutenant Colonel?" Alexis took a deep breath, her eyes softening with fleeting sadness. "From my father, who taught me that honor isn't in your rank or medals. It's in whether you stand up to protect those weaker than you." Below, many lowered their heads, wiping tears. In that moment, Alexis was not just someone who exposed darkness. She had become the guiding light for an entire generation lost in fear and silence. A Reuters reporter raised his hand, his voice stern. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, do you have a message for the officers and officials listed in these files?" Alexis looked straight into the camera, her gaze cold as forged steel. "I want them to know I'm not doing this out of hatred. I'm doing it for justice." Her voice slowed, each word striking like a hammer. "They forgot that their power exists to protect, not to oppress. They turned their badges into weapons, turned the law into a shield for crime." She leaned toward the mic, unblinking. "But today that shield is gone. They will answer to the law. And if the law isn't enough, they will answer to the wrath of millions they once despised." Silence filled the hall, broken only by camera shutters clicking relentlessly. In that moment, no one doubted. Alexis Carter had become the worst nightmare of an entire rotten system once believed untouchable. Suddenly, O'Connor's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at the screen, his face going pale. Quickly, he stepped up, whispering in Alexis's ear, "Lieutenant Colonel, we have a problem. Some files have been hacked. They're leaking on the darknet." Alexis narrowed her eyes, her voice unwaveringly calm. "Which files?" O'Connor swallowed hard. "Witness identities, current locations, and security or records of investigative agents." Alexis clenched her fist on the podium, her eyes flashing with cold fury. She turned straight to the camera, her voice ringing out strong as thunder. "I know you're listening. You can hack data, threaten witnesses, bribe officials, but you can't hack the truth." She leaned into the mic, her voice dropping hard as steel. "And remember, with every threat you make, you only prove to the world that I was right about you." The hall fell silent, only the wind howling against the glass behind her. In that moment, Alexis Carter turned every threat into a weapon, the weapon of truth. The room remained heavy with silence. A New York Times reporter spoke softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Lieutenant Colonel Carter, with all you're facing, threats, data leaks, your life in danger, do you ever regret activating the Falcon Protocol?" Alexis looked directly at her, her gaze softening briefly. "I don't regret it." Her voice rang out slowly but powerfully. "I only regret that Falcon wasn't activated sooner. I only regret that too many never lived to tell their stories." She clenched her hand on the podium, her voice dropping into a vow. "They deserve an apology from this system. But since the system will never give it, I will do it for them. And I vow those who harm them will never know peace again." Camera flashes burst repeatedly. In that moment, everyone understood. This was not merely a promise from a soldier. This was the oath of a warrior determined to rip the darkness from the heart of a nation. Just then, O'Connor's phone buzzed again. His eyes widened as he read the screen. "Lieutenant Colonel, urgent update. The Department of Justice and the Pentagon have responded. They have approved an emergency federal investigation based on your disclosures." Alexis closed her eyes for a second, inhaled deeply, then opened them to look straight into the camera. Her voice rang out firm, strong as a bronze bell. "People of America, today we have won the first step, but this is not the end. This is only the beginning." She paused, her eyes sharp as a drawn blade. "I want all of you, those abused, threatened, silenced, to remember this moment, because from today we no longer fight alone." Below, many reporters were in tears. A female CNN journalist whispered into her mic, her voice choked. "History is being written before our eyes." Alexis took a deep breath, her hand gripping the Falcon Protocol on her wrist. In that moment, she knew. This battle would be long, but she was ready to walk its path, no matter what lay ahead. As the press conference ended, Alexis stepped off the podium amidst camera flashes and shouting journalists. O'Connor moved quickly beside her, whispering, "Lieutenant Colonel, the vehicle is ready. We need to leave now. Intelligence reports a security threat against you." Alexis nodded slightly, her eyes staring straight ahead, her voice calm and cold. "Let them come." In the hallway, Colonel Harris waited, his gaze grave. "Carter, you just set off a political bomb. They won't let you go easily." Alexis looked him directly in the eyes, her voice strong and clear. "I don't need them to let me go. I need them to fear me. Because when oppressors start to fear, justice can finally breathe." Harris smiled faintly, patting her shoulder. "Good. Because from now on, you're not just the Falcon Protocol. You are the weapon." Alexis gripped her hat strap, her eyes glinting with cold steel. "I wasn't born to be a weapon, Colonel. I was born to end wars." Then she walked on, her straight back passing the rows of guards, leaving behind a heavy silence. The silence before the greatest storm. In the armored vehicle leaving the federal building, Alexis sat silently, her eyes staring through the bulletproof glass. Outside, the streets bustled, but to her all sound seemed to fade. O'Connor sat opposite, his laptop open, his voice urgent. "Lieutenant Colonel, responses are pouring in. Congress demands the full files by today. The Department of Justice wants you at a special hearing tomorrow morning." Alexis did not reply, her eyes fixed on the passing crowds. Finally she spoke, her voice low and cold. "And the White House?" O'Connor hesitated, then sighed. "They remain silent." Alexis gave a faint, icy smile, her eyes glinting cold. "Of course. They won't speak until they have no other choice." She turned her gaze to O'Connor. "Prepare all the data. Tell the DOJ. I'll be there." The vehicle sped across a great bridge, sunset rays hitting her uniform, making her metals gleam. In that moment, Alexis Carter was no longer an ordinary person. She had become the storm named Truth. The armored vehicle stopped at the military base, where dozens of soldiers stood in line waiting to receive Alexis. As she stepped down, every gaze fell upon her. The small woman with a white bandage on her temple, walking with the strength of someone carrying the sky on her shoulders. Colonel Harris approached, his voice firm. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, the DOJ has confirmed the emergency hearing at 9 a.m. tomorrow. They want you as their primary witness. Alexis nodded, her eyes gleaming with cold steel. Good. This will be the first cut into this cancer. Harris sighed softly, his voice dropping. Do you know that after tomorrow there will be no turning back? Alexis lifted her head, looking straight into his eyes. Sir, I don't need a way back. I just need a path to justice. The soldiers on both sides stood at attention, saluting as she walked past. In that moment, no one saw a woman once beaten by police. They saw a warrior leading an entire nation into the final battle to reclaim dignity and justice long stolen. The next morning, the Capitol building was silent as Alexis entered the hearing room. DOJ, Pentagon, senators, all were seated. She stood tall in the center, morning sunlight streaming through the large window, illuminating her uniform and the fresh scar on her temple. Her voice rang out, slow yet powerful, each word striking the cold marble floor. I do not stand here to ask for pity. I do not stand here to beg for justice. I stand here to remind you that justice is not a privilege. It is a constitutional right of every citizen, whether they wear this uniform or not. She inhaled deeply, her eyes locking onto the rows of senators, glinting cold. Today, I have fulfilled my duty to expose the truth, but your duty is only beginning. Because if you choose to turn your eyes away from this truth, remember this, I will not stop. I will keep fighting until every oppressor kneels before justice. The room fell into absolute silence. Then thunderous applause erupted, echoing through the chamber with the force of a storm. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to this channel. Share this video so everyone understands. Justice only exists because there are those willing to pay the price to protect it.